so still wanted to um, uh, focus on the survey items again, based on kind of the importance of of the employee experience in the surveys, but also just talk about best practices with managers and employees. And I'm sure some of you guys will know some of this content, but I hope that this will be content that maybe you will share with your leaders. um, Maybe there is something that's new for them, information wise, that maybe they could take to heart with all of this. But without further ado, I guess I'll go ahead and get started. Yeah, so building stronger manager employee relationships. Um, so obviously we'll kind of cover overarching why a good manager employee relationship matters, matters for your organization, but then also matters for things like, a survey, and especially the best places survey. We'll identify some of the benefits for the managers and the employees. Again, with concepts, so maybe you can sell the benefits to some of your folks. And then at the end, we'll kind of talk about some ways to build upon or maybe even improve relationships, if needed. Why it matters, why the employee manager relationship is so critical is it has a strong correlation to the employee's outcome and just general engagement, happiness within the organization. But interestingly enough, 70% of overall employee engagement is driven by their relationship or their experience with their manager. The other 30%, give or take, are things like, pay, benefits, work-life balance, all of that stuff, which I would say is all very important, but, I guess surprisingly, so 70% though, their overall experiences based on that relationship with their manager. But employees who reported that that rated their manager highly were 4 times more as likely to be engaged than those who rated their manager poorly, which kind of correlates to that previous statistic. But employees who rated their manager highly were 2 times as likely themselves to be considered are perceived to be a high performer or a high individual contributor within their organization or by their own peers. So obviously, looks like there's a correlation between strong relationships with the manager and probably their abilities to grow, develop, perform well, be productive, and then maybe even get a little positive attention for all of their output because of that relationship with their manager. But a few things, hold on, sorry. There we go. Few things with some other correlation between key survey metrics on things like best places to work, and just good surveys in general around employee engagement. But the employee manager relationship, there's a strong correlation between higher overall engagement scores for the organization, better job satisfaction by the employee, their experience within the organization, an increased commitment to the organization. There was a study done a couple of years ago, kind of during the pandemic, about people's intent, or I guess not intent, but their likelihood to leave. And most people that had high engagement scores, high relationship with their managers, when asked, do you anticipate or visualize yourself or envision yourself leaving? It was the higher the score, the higher the level of perceived commitment and the delay in potentially leaving. So it was like 5+ years that before somebody may consider leaving or pursuing something else. Whereas the folks that obviously rated their manager lower, it was with like in the next 18 months, they were looking to either leave or change their situation some way. And then that correlated obviously to lower turnover intent. But just from seeing surveys, conducting surveys, reviewing data with clients and on their survey scores, these are kind of like my red flag, like something's not quite right here and we need to dig into like what might be going on. But any of these items that have a low score, like I trust my manager cares about me as a person, or I receive regular feedback from my manager, if any of those like are low, that's definitely a red flag, I think, for me, but also for the organization. Kind of like I said, dig in a little bit to out what is going on there. And I'll be honest, there's a lot of folks that um, are naturally inclined to be really good leaders, and they have really good relationships with their employees. However, there's also that population of people that they're really in the position because maybe they have the most expertise or experience, or they're they've got the most organizational knowledge or whatever. So they're kind of in the role because it's practical to put them in the role, but they still need to work on these kinds of skills. Um, So what does a good relationship look like? And again, some of these are probably very obvious, but nonetheless, wanted to go over them because, like I said, hopefully this is something that you could share with some of your folks if they need some, or just some new ideas, things to mind. But obviously, clear expectations. And it sounds like, well, that's obvious, right? But there's a lot of assumption, I think, that takes place between managers and teams in general, right? I think both sides kind of expect the other to read their minds and kind of know what they want. Um, uh, and obviously, that doesn't always work. We can't always assume what others need from us. So clarity is particularly important. So employees want to know what's expected of them. They want to know what their goals are, personal or team or organizational. They want to know what their responsibilities are, what behaviors are desired within that team or within that organization. What kind of important deadlines are there, and then obviously some sort of success metrics, because most people like to see, yes, I've checked that off the list, or I've crossed that finish line, or whatever, like that sense of accomplishment. But why it matters is, like I said, with the huge assumption that I think happens between folks in the is that it reduces confusion, ambiguity, sorry, and a lot of wasted effort. It increases confidence and autonomy, so the employees can actually work independently when they know the target. There's a few items on surveys that are around meaningful work, and meaningful work usually is correlated with a high sense of personal autonomy. And most people, regardless of the role, want to feel some sort of autonomy, agency, some sort of sense that they're the master of their own destiny. So they can do that when they know the target, and that the leader either supports them in that or at least has shown them this is the way towards that. It also aligns their individual performance with the team and organizational goals. A lot of times, I think, the individual experience or the individual work that someone does, I think some folks are really good at kind of connecting how it all rolls up to the bigger picture. And then some people need a little bit more help connecting those dots. And I think managers sometimes have a blind spot for helping people put those things together, those concepts together. That there's no task or job or duty within any organization that is not important, even if it seemingly feels that way sometimes. It also promotes fairness, and I think that's what a lot of managers kind of struggle with, is how do I maintain everybody's expectations of me, of the organization, whatever, make sure that whatever I'm doing as a manager is perceived as fair and equitable. But again, if they're clear on their expectations, it really helps people understand what is required for them to succeed or grow in that role or in the organization. So what does it look like in practice? Clear job descriptions and responsibilities. And I know you guys probably are really good about having job descriptions, but I will say that, if the manager and the employee aren't, reviewing those at least every year, or at max maybe every 2 years, to make sure that they are up to date. I think a lot of times within organizations, and for good reason, things change very quickly. They evolve, and that's a sign of strong organizational performance. But then what sometimes that happens is we kind of forget to do the administrative part of it, which is maybe go back and update what are our duties, responsibilities, or key indicators of success on those job descriptions. And then people sometimes feel like they're at a loss, like, well, I don't feel like I'm really doing what I was hired to do, or I'm not really doing what this position was, or how it was originally intended. So I always said, like in practice, yes, establishing a good job description is part of the equation, but really the reflective exercise like I said, hopefully every year, if not every 2 years, of going in there and making those edits, making those changes, and they can be subtle or nuanced, but the impact can feel much greater to the employee that actually does the work. Also, managers regularly communicating priorities and changes, and we'll talk a little bit about this later too. I think for the experience of the employee, and a lot of times what you see in surveys, both within the quantitative and the qualitative sections of the survey, is that people have a lot of anxiety around potential change or things that may be on the horizon for the organization, their team, their role, etc. And they'd like to know those things in advance or in as real time as possible, and not kind of given that surprise, like, oh, so this thing's going to be changed, or this objective changed, or whatever. So the faster, the sooner that we can communicate those things and be transparent about the why behind it, the better. And it can really help reduce or ease a lot of the anxiety, or it's like it's the anxiety around potential change. What am I trying to say? Anticipatory, sometimes anxiety that people have with organizations or their roles. Hopefully, they're also, the managers have really good goal setting conversations. And I said smart objectives or smart goals here as well, where they are, they are specific, they are measurable. Hopefully, they're attainable, and they're time bound. So that gives that person a sense of accomplishment, that like, I got that done, I can move, towards the next goal or objective that I need to in my role. And then feedback. Feedback in real time for small effort, or smaller scale projects or goals that are accomplished, but then also that overarching feedback around career development, or what are they looking to grow into, or things like that. So it's the real time, and, or I guess, the micro and the macro types of feedback that people are looking for. And feedback's going to look different to different people based on their style and kind of how they like to receive feedback. And are seeing a little interesting demographic shift in the frequency of feedback. And I think I'll talk about this in a couple more slides, but we are seeing the younger generations, when they check the box on the demographic portion of the surveys, they're expecting feedback to be more frequent than maybe older, more mature generations. But the modality has changed. So they may not necessarily, look forward to that annual review process, because, well, nobody really does. But they may be looking for more bite-sized, real-time kind of feedback opportunities. And that could be, through an email, a chat, a text, whatever. Like it's some other medium or format than like the traditional kind of feedback that I think we've all kind of grown accustomed to. And I think there's a little bit of thought around why that could be.
Слушай, во-первых, я просто уже завтра все уезжаем, завтра в 4 утра. Я просто тебе, что у меня еще последний.
Okay. And just that the younger the employee, usually the more direction that they need, more feedback, more assurance they need when they're new to a role or new to an organization. So some of it's just by nature of being new, that they may need that frequent feedback. But there's also a little theory of thought on just the fact that they've grown up with like social media and that kind of instantaneous feedback, like comment type environment, where they're just inundated with feedback, and therefore they kind of expect that in the rest of their life as well. Let's see. So the next one, is all about trust and respect. So I want to start with some kind of sobering statistics on this one. This is from a study from Harvard Business Review. This was done right before the pandemic. But 58% of employees, there's a national survey, I think it was 4,100 organizations that participated. 58% of employees trusted a stranger more than their own boss, and 45% cited lack of trust in the leadership as their biggest issue that impacted their work performance. So obviously we don't want that to be the case here. That's right. That's why we're participating in things like Best Places to Work, right? But two of the kind of hallmarks of that are trust and respect. And I'll talk a little bit about the concept of organizational trust and psychological safety here in a second, but it's that mutual belief that that one another, both employee and manager, are both reliable. They have good integrity. They have competency and good intentions. And that competency one is an important one too. It's like I have to trust you that you know what you're talking about. You're not going to lead us down a bad path or towards failure. And of course, all of those things take time to build within relationships or within an organization. But I think we've talked in some other sessions, very quick to lose, right? If we make some missteps or some bad judgments and we don't own it, and then try to work to rectify it. But why does it matter? Obviously, it forms the foundation to a strong working relationship, hopefully to enable some sort of open conversation without the fear of judgment, backlash, and then it goes into psychological safety that we'll talk about here in a second. Hopefully, it empowers the employees to take more initiative and make decisions, and again, helps them again with that sense of agency, autonomy, that their work matters. Overarching, it boosts morale and loyalty because people want to work for someone who believes in them, that they relate to, and they want to stick around, hopefully, with that team or that manager. But what does it look like in practice? Managers that keep their promises and follow through with them. And if they can't, they explain the why, or they give the justification. Employees feel that their ideas, time, and their contributions are valued. There's a presumption of positive intent during disagreements. And then the managers give them autonomy and avoid micromanagement. I think micromanagement comes up in another slide here in a second. But I will say one of the most corrosive behaviors and styles to an organization, not just the team and or the people on the team, but just the organization in general. If you're getting feedback that a particular leader is a micromanager, and it's more than just one source of that kind of feedback, I would say there is a good chance that you might be able to work and help develop that person to try to avoid that behavior. But in practice, it's very, very difficult for a micromanager to actually kind of get over it. Yeah, because there's more than just I don't know, bad management style, or there's sometimes some other kind of psychological things that are going on there. And so I will say that if you get lots of feedback around a particular leader having a micromanagement problem, I would say it's probably advisable for you to think about, does that person actually need to be in a leadership role? Because over time, it's going to turn people off, not want to work for that person in general. So if there's a way to maybe not have them in a role like that, that'd be great, because they could be excellent individual contributors and experts or whatever, but maybe people management's not their thing. I know, controversial take, right? Or easier said than done, but it's very hard to get over a micromanagement style. So regular, honest communication, another foundational element to this good relationship between manager and employee. Like I said, hopefully it's ongoing. It's two-way communication. It's timely, transparent, and constructive. Timely being a very key point in that one. But hopefully it keeps employees informed and aligned with the priorities. And as you guys probably can attest, sometimes those priorities do change, or they can change kind of on a dime. So keeping people up to date in real time really does matter. It encourages dialogue rather than the assumption. I talked about assumptions before, but this kind of mind reading that we expect out of one another, it's never going to make us feel very satisfied at the end. But it also helps reduce things like gossip, or frustration, or just overall disengagement. It can build trust when the feedback is honest, fair, and actionable. But that also is something that is built over time. It's not like a one and done, especially if the employee or the group has never really experienced good types of feedback before. The first time a manager gives them that type of feedback, they may look at them like they have three heads. but as long as it's honest, fair, and actionable, people can see over time that that actually is for their benefit. But it also, again, if there is something that's going on that needs to be course corrected, it does create that space for course correction or coaching, and just recognition, right, of a job well done. So what does it look like in practice? One-on-one check-ins with meaningful discussions, not just task updates. So sometimes working with different leaders, in leadership development kind of capacities, like coaching, things like that, we talk a lot about how the task updates aren't necessarily beneficial for those types of meetings. Basically, there should be a time and place for general updates, but really those meetings should be more for challenges and opportunities, and not just let's go through the 50 things I have to do in the next 2 weeks. Because if you're a good manager,